Oh, welcome, welcome. Fantastic. So, hello everybody. I'm very happy to say that Adriana just joined us and Wellington as well. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much. Just on time. Very well. Fantastic. So, we are going to officially start our third International Jonah Club during this COVID-19 pandemic. So before we go further, I'm going to welcome the corresponding author of the article that we are going to read right now, Professor Adriana Fernandez, if I pronounce her name very well. So Adriana, please go ahead, say some greeting to everybody, please.
Thank you, Professor. So
you can call me Mohammed, that is easier.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. So we are from Brazil, in the South Brazil, and you are very happy and appreciate so much your invite to meet with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. And Professor Wellington, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes,
and say some greeting to everybody.
Thank you. We appreciate your invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you now. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. It's very difficult for me to see all of you, and obviously we are now around 120 people from around the world that I'm happy. As I can see, we have the Mr. President of Asian Pacific Endodontics Society. Hello, Wenki. We have Wenki from Malaysia. Thank you very much for joining us. That's amazing. And also we have Professor Talal Al-Nahlawi from Syria, another star of endodontics. So that's amazing. So from around the world, we have from Turkey, from Malaysia, from Syria, from Jordan, from Brazil, from Canada, and many people from India, many of our postgraduate students from around the world. So welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Give you some very short history of why we are here and what we are doing here. It was just a start as a journal club, simple journal club in our department, which is endodontic department. And my postgraduate students start actually presenting some articles, and most of the articles that we start actually reading them are meta-analysis and systematic reviews. As you can see, we have Professor Wenki Babu. Venkatesh Babu is one of the experts in the world in terms of meta-analysis. I'm sure Adriana and Wellington knows him very well as well. And now we have two authors from Brazil that we are going to read. Oh, hello, Basin. And we have another star of endodontics from India. Thank you very much for joining us. That's amazing. Now we have 135 people around. So then we decide actually, because of this COVID-19 pandemic and because some of us are stay at home and some of us are start some sort of urgent works and something like that. So we decide actually to gather under one umbrella of Zoom communication. So each of us invite our student, and fortunately the president of APEC, which is Asian Pacific Endodontic Confederation, Professor Mehmet Beybrakahan, let us to do that under the umbrella of APEC as well. So
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kayahan. Please go ahead and say your greeting to everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Nakova, Professor Nakova. We are very happy to be here. It's our pleasure to be with you, and thank you for sharing this successful event with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your support as well. So what we are going to do, we are going actually to put the recorded sessions of Professor Venkatesh Babu in our website, and we send you some information about that, and we will share with you the link of the website very soon as well. So, and APEC is going to advertise that at the same time. In our Facebook, you can find us as well. So you can find me in the Facebook by just typing my name, which is NEKOOFAR, and I will announce the next sessions there. And when we officially arrange everything, we'll let you know. The plan is one of our students in the future, obviously one of your students should do that as well. We can have another meeting with the professors of each universities to discuss who is going to, for example, next 2 weeks or next week to present. But now, one of our students, Dr. Zahra Mohammadi, is going to present. She's actually one of our international students. She's going to present the article, which is very difficult to do that in front of the authors and the corresponding authors, obviously. Same as the Arvin that did same thing during the last 2 weeks in front of Professor Babu, and Professor Babu confirmed that Arvin was good actually in that last 2 sessions. So today, Zahra is going to present, and obviously during her presentation, if you have any question, you may tell us. Hello, Professor Rohit. You may tell us, and you may ask your questions if you, as you wish, or if you have some questions from the authors about whatever you want. If you want to criticize them, if you want to kill them, don't do that. Just criticize them. You are free to do that. We invite them to tell them we like their articles or we don't like their articles. I'm kidding, don't worry. Definitely your article is very, very good, similar to article by Wenki that he did a great job by clarifying and simplifying very difficult topics. So I'm not going to wait you anymore. I'm happy to announce that now we have 100, it's increasing, 100, almost 60 people around. I think this time is better than the previous time. So just for Malaysia, I think it's very late. Almost midnight. Thank you very much, Wenki. I really appreciate you join us. Okay, Wenki, do you want to say something? And then we are going to start.
No. Just I don't want to waste everybody's time now. So good luck. Just go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Rohit, do you want to say something? Some greeting to everybody.
Good evening to all. Let's go ahead. Let's start. Welcome all. Okay, and we have Prashant. So Prashant, if I pronounce your name very well, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself as well? Because Prashant is going to be our next.
Everybody hello to everybody, and let's begin. Let's begin.
Good. Let's ask go. Talal if Talal wants to say hi to everybody. Talal, Professor Talal Al-Nahlawi. Okay, maybe later. Okay, Talal, please go ahead. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yes. It's nice seeing you all, and really it's a very good idea. Thank you for your efforts. I don't want to waste anyone's time, and we are all eager to listen to you. Thank you.
Okay, Zahra, the stage is yours. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear my voice? It's clear?
Yes, very well.
I'm Zahra. I'm going to present a systematic review. Arvin, can you share the slides, please? Thank you. Today, I want to present the systematic review by Dr. Da Rosa and Dr. Da Silva. Title is a calcium, next slide, please. Yes. It's a calcium hydroxide liner necessary in the treatment of deep caries lesion, a systematic review and meta-analysis. Journal of International Endodontics, 2018. As you know, treatment of teeth with deep caries lesion is a challenge for clinicians. So to prevent pulp exposure, which can compromise the prognosis, leaving a layer of contaminated caries over the pulp after selective or stepwise removal has been suggested. Selective removal, unlike selective removal, stepwise removal has 2 stages. Textbook Art and Science 2019 defines selective removal as complete caries removal preferably to a sound caries-free DJ. axially and pulpally, caries is removed within approximately 1 millimeter of the pulp within soft dentine. It means you can leave some soft, even contaminated dentine over the pulp to prevent pulp exposure. As I said, stepwise removal has 2 stages. First stage is like selective removal, which was caries removal to soft dentine, but here we have provisional restoration for 6 to 12 months. At the next stage, we need re-entry and selective removal to firm dentine, and then put in definitive restoration in place. The maintenance of caries dentine is aimed to modifying the microenvironment to arrest the cariogenic process, which allows remineralization of the lesion and formation the tertiary dentine. And the purpose of using a liner is to promote the formation of dentin bridge and a tertiary dentine to protect pulp from stimulation. Calcium hydroxide is a very common material as liner. Is thanks to its alkalinity, biocompatibility, inducing pulp dentin remineralization, and decreasing bacterial infection. Long-term studies have shown a high success rate for selective and stepwise removal of caries lesion. Clinical success means healthy pulp with positive sensitivity to cold and heat, absence of spontaneous pain, and absence of periapical lesion in radiographic examinations. But on the other hand, some clinical radiographic microbiological studies have shown simply sealing the cavity properly could lead to inactivation of active deep caries lesion, even with inert material. So there comes the question. These long-term clinical success are due to sealing the caries dentine or due to the liner material. So the aim of this systematic review was to evaluate whether it's necessary to use calcium hydroxide liner in the treatment of deep caries lesion of primary and permanent teeth. You can see the hypothesis tested and research question. I move on to material and methods. This systematic review was reported in accordance to PRISMA statement registered in the International Database for Systematic Review, Prospero, and 2 independent reviewers searched 8 databases. As you can see the names until 27th February 2018. And the references of the article included were also manually checked. You can see the inclusion and exclusion criteria, prospective and retrospective clinical trial were included. So systematic reviews, case report, case studies, and the other type of studies were excluded. All subjects had to be have deep caries lesion treated with and without calcium hydroxide liner. Studies in which calcium hydroxide was applied after direct pulp cap or after pulp exposure were removed. An outcome had to be obtained by clinical, radiographic, or laboratory evaluation. Laboratory evaluation like histological, microbiological, or physicomechanical analysis. And studies that compare calcium hydroxide liner with another liner like MTA were removed, and only studies in English were included.
Sarah, may I stop you? Sorry about that,
Yes.
Clara. Stop you. So I'm going to ask the author the first question. Each of you, whoever prefer to answer this question, please go ahead. The question is, you said that only English literature were evaluated. My question is, because this is a very popular topic, I'm sure at least in Brazil or in many other countries, you may find a lot of articles. Why you choose just to look at the English literature? What is behind that? So that can be one of the shortage. Yeah, please turn on your microphone and answer this question.
So we chose this only English language because we believe that the good work are produced, are the published here in Brazil. So you believe that good journals published them in English. So because you have many works published in all languages, but so for this reason we try only to limit it.
So I'm going to ask Wenki to tell his idea about that. Wenki, what do you think? Is it enough to just look at the English literature, or should we look at other languages as well? Because I know in Portuguese, in Spanish, in other languages, in Arabic, in Persian, in Turkey, we may find a lot of articles. Obviously, it is very difficult to go to the details of them. And English now is a scientific language. But can you tell us what is behind that? Is it enough in the systematic review, especially in a meta-analysis, just looking at one language or not? French or other language, we missed all of them. What do you think, Wenki?
Yeah. Coming to your question, what generally in systematic review is, ideally speaking, we have to include all the languages. If we restrict the language to any one or two particular language, it will result in bias. But practically speaking, including all the languages will be very difficult. That's why even though most of the articles will be restricting only to the English language, providedly most of the scientific journals is published only in English language. That is the rationale behind most of them are using only in English.
Because I remember that last week when we asked you this question, that do you mind about the journal that we publish in that? Is it important in which journal the article is published? You answered it is not important. The importance is the quality of the article, not the journal which is published in that. And as you said, scientifically or theoretically, it is very important to look at all languages when we are looking at a data and we want to pool the data together. Am I right?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Okay, Wellington, what do you think about that?
I think it's important to include all language when we could, but we did not exclude any article because of this, and probably because we don't look in databases from other countries, maybe. But I think we only included in the analysis the studies with bias, with less bias. So I think we included the good papers to summarize the evidence that we wanted. There are so many articles in Brazilian articles about this topic and in gray literature also. But we wanted to include only the evidence in English because we didn't know to read another language, and it would be a problem for us. There are other studies in which we included also other systematic reviews that we performed. There included also studies in Portuguese and in Spanish, and the reviewers requested us because we should have only included in English. So after that, we only included in our reviews, we are only using the English language because of this problem that some good journals have this problem with accepting papers published in other languages.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Valentin. Okay, Zahra, carry on.
Yes, thank you. And the two reviewers tabulate the data. Next slide, please, Dr. Arvin. Yes, this one. Tabulated all the data regarding to study design. Yes, Caries tissue removal methods, type of cavity, group evaluated, restorative procedure, evaluation method, and main finding, and whether or not the calcium hydroxide liner was beneficial to the clinical success. The analyses were performed with considering the clinical and radiographic success rate of these treated with and without calcium hydroxide liner, and collected from randomized clinical trial with at least 12 months of follow-up. Global analysis comparing calcium hydroxide with adhesive system and with glass ionomer cement were performed. Subgroup analysis considered 12, 24, and 50 months of follow-up was also performed. In global analysis, tooth loss due to exfoliation or dropout patients were not included. So they performed a sensitivity analysis considering exfoliation or dropout once as success and once as failure.
Zara, what's the meaning of global analysis?
I mean, it's the main meta-analysis. They pull the data, and I think they pull the data, and it's the main meta-analysis.
And is there any difference between global analysis and meta-analysis?
I think there is not.
Do you want Professor Wellington to add something to that? Professor Wellington, do you want to add something to this question? What is the difference between global analysis and meta-analysis?
So the global analysis was the analysis considering all follow-ups and different materials tested. And the subgroup analysis was to see if any of these factors could affect the results. So it's a meta-analysis also, but it's just a difference between considering all data and just choosing some subgroups.
Okay, so this is not something similar to network analysis, because we already discussed network analysis. So it is not that one. So please, everybody, be careful when we use some term. We need to define the terminology for better understanding. So we cannot move easily from globe, because in scientific literature, you cannot write something without a proper definition. So definitely global analysis, there is a minimum difference between that and the meta-analysis, which already, I think, described. Thank you very much. Zahra, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And full effect estimates were obtained by comparing the risk difference of each study with a 95% confidence interval. Fixed effect model were used, and heterogeneity was assessed by using Cochrane Q-test and inconsistency I2 statistics. And value higher than 50% being considered indicative of substantial heterogeneity. For quality assessment, they use Cochrane guideline and check bias due to incomplete data, as well as selection, performance, detection, and reporting bias. They check the industry sponsorship bias too, and moreover, they used GRAY for evidence of outcome evaluated for failure in primary and permanencies. And unexplained heterogeneity, inconsistency between trials, indirectness of comparison in precision, and the risk of publication bias was considered as
Okay.
risk of bias within the
Can I
trial.
ask everybody to turn off your microphone, please? Would you please turn off your microphone if you're not speaking? Thank you. I'm going to mute all, and then Zara, you can turn on your microphone again. Okay, Zara, go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to move on to result. As you can see,
the bias slide, please? Excuse me. Can you go back to the
Yes.
bias, because we
Yes.
can have some quick description about the type of bias that's mentioned here. Can you tell us something quickly about the definition of the bias that you mentioned?
It means the author has a interest in one result or a specific result. So it has bias. It has a lot of kind, like selection bias or like performance detection.
Okay, so
There are a lot of them.
let's go
I don't know
one by
you
one.
mean.
What is the bias due to incomplete data? What's the meaning of that?
I think the authors didn't mention all the data clearly, so it's kind of bias, and we can't understand what he or she really did in the study.
Is already published, but the data was not complete. So such a study should exclude from the meta-analysis.
Yes, they include, but in the grade, we check the level of evidence in the grade, and we can say our recommendation has how strong is our recommendation. But we can use it in the meta-analysis.
Валя, слышно?
Okay, Adriana or Wellington, can you tell us something about this type of bias, incomplete data?
Да. Валя, скажи, а сейчас будет слышно? Вот сейчас слышно?
Some of our
Слышно.
I'm going to mute all again. Sorry about that. And then please, would you please turn your microphone, Wellington and Zara, please answer this question, Professor Wellington. Okay, sorry. Okay, you're mute, Wellington.
Okay, now it's okay. Sorry. Regarding complete data, there is a difference here between the risk of bias.
Oops. Wellington, again, you are mute.
Okay.
Oops. Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. Okay, there is a difference here between the risk of bias and the quality assessment. The risk of bias, we use the Cochrane guidelines. Now we have a different guideline for the risk of bias that is used. This was the one that was used at that time. And the grade, we use it to evaluate the evidence that we obtain from our results. The incomplete data is about there is some data missing in the results. And I think, especially this, there are other parameters that we analyze here. The risk of bias is one of the most difficult things to perform. We need to study the guidelines. I think it was one of the most difficult parts of a review, of a systematic review. We now have a new guideline, but the incomplete data, summarizing, it's not having all data that it was reported being that was supposed to be reported being in the paper. And we have, I think here we have two papers, two studies included with this problem, that we have problems in regarding this parameter.
Okay, and what is the detection bias? Can you describe that? What is the meaning of detection bias?
Yes, detection. Just let me see here. Detection.
Because here they said bias due to incomplete data as well as selection, performance, detection, and reporting bias.
Yes.
If possible, give us a simple definition of detection bias.
Just let me see here because there are so many bias. Just let me look.
Yes, because this bias also can give us completely wrong conclusion at the end of meta-analysis and end of the systematic review. Adriana, can you help us about others, industry sponsorship bias? Because this is also very...
Detection is about the blinding of the outcome assessor that we consider here, of outcome assessment. The attrition bias is about the incomplete data, and there are many, we can see in the figure 4 of the article. Now we have other bias that are analyzed in this. There are other parameters that you use. Robbins 1 is the one most commonly used.
If you find some sort of a sponsorship bias, that means the authors are, they receive some sort of funding from the companies. What do you decide to do? What is your decision in that situation? Are you going to exclude those articles, or still do you use those data?
I think it's a kind of evidence, so we should include in the analysis, but we should consider in this when we are analyzing the evidence available by grade, for example. We should consider this. There is a bias, but it is an evidence. So maybe there is a sponsorship, but if the study is well designed, we can include it and consider the evidence. So there are so many things that we need to analyze when we are performing a systematic review.
I like to have the idea of some others about this sponsorship bias, because this sponsorship bias sometimes is some sort of hidden mistake that we may forget about that. Wenki, can you help us about this sponsorship bias? What should we do about that? Should we exclude those type of articles or not? I think Wenki, can you turn on your microphone? Okay, any of other professors, do you want to add something about sponsorship bias? Because the sponsorship bias is something that I'm really worried sometimes when we see such a things. Because just imagine if I want to run some study and I receive some sort of funding from the companies, sometimes even they ask us to sign some sort of secrecy agreement and some sort of agreement that usually is very, very difficult to answer, to report something if something wrong happens. Oh, I think one of our colleagues is going to speak. Please go ahead. I've seen some raised hand. If you want to speak, please turn on your microphone and speak. No? Professor Kayahan, do you want to add anything to that? Others, please?
It's a very hard question, really, the sponsorship bias, because most of the times the sponsors are very well-known companies. And this is a sometimes hard answer to exclude this bias or not, because there are also partners in clinical studies, and I don't know. That's a hard question, and sometimes we can't decide what to do.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can see Prashant. What do you think about that?
I think it's more on the influence what generally happens, because once you are on the sponsorship bias, that's the influence what as an author we get it, because the companies, they influence you on that. So again, when the studies are being done, I feel then that bias is one thing which is actually we need to consider enough, because it depends on what product we are working on, and then accordingly we can decide on the things that is needed.
Oh my God. Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. Please carry on, Prashant.
Yeah, that's what I think, because maybe because it influences the study, because the sponsorship bias, always you have the back of the mind, you have the influence that yes, I am doing this study because it's a sponsorship bias. So again, in that, definitely we as a researchers, when we are working, we have to keep that thing in mind. So again, it depends, as Mehmet sir has said, absolutely agree with him, that it sometimes becomes difficult. And also the good companies, when they are working on it, then we have to get those things right in that place.
Yep. Thank you very much.
And I think, and one more point I would like to add here is then we have to actually compare both the scientific with the clinical experience. I think then only we can say this study has a much more influence in terms of the working, because finally when the study reaches to us as an academicians, then I feel we should have the scientific, also we should have a clinical perspective should be very clear before we introduce into our curriculum. That's or probably into our practices.
I think another factor
Ria, do you want to speak, because I can see you raise your hand. Ria Tandon. If yes, please unmute your microphone and speak. Ria? No? Okay, Zara, carry on, please. Oh, Ria, do you want to speak? No? Okay, Zara, you go ahead.
Okay, let's go to result. Next slide, please. Yes. As you can see, the flow chart, 1,537 studies were identified from 8 databases, and 1,067 records remain after removal of duplicates. At the next stage, 1,047 records excluded on basis of the title and abstract. So 20 full text assessed for eligibility, and 3 of them excluded. One because did not use calcium hydroxide cement, one evaluate class 5 restoration without caries lesion, and one evaluate total caries removal. So 17 studies included in the qualitative synthesis, and 6 of them were included in the meta-analysis. Please, next slide, Dr. Arvin.
Professor Adriana, do you want to tell us something about this stage or not? I mean, about the selections and the identification, screening, eligibility, and inclusion. Do you want to add anything, or is it clear?
I think it's so clear, because you only choose the paper, the research use only for the operative dentistry, for example, not for endodontic. So only, for example, only class 1. I don't know if you use this mention too, but it's so simple.
Yeah, but the reason that I ask this question is because I can see you identified around 1,500 potentially relevant records, and then it ends up to 6 studies for meta-analysis. So what is behind this difference? I mean, when you have potentially 1,500 articles and end up with 6 articles, my question, I ask this question because we have a lot of students here and we want to tell them about the story behind this selection. You know, I know the answer, but I want to listen to this answer from your point of view as the authors. Wellington, what do you think? Can you explain a little about that for us, or Adriana, whoever?
I think the main reason here was because initially we we identified all studies with calcium hydroxide, and there are so many studies that are comparing two liners, and we need to include, we wanted to include studies that compared a liner and a group without a liner, or without a liner mainly. And initially we wanted to evaluate also other liners and not using a liner. It was our initial idea, and then we see that we didn't find any other studies at that moment that comparing a liner and a group without a liner, there wasn't a calcium hydroxide. So that many of the studies initially excluded was because of this, was because there was no group without a liner, many of them.
And only
you may change the way of the search. So if you change your search strategy, you may end up with less articles and you don't need to remove a lot of articles. What do you think? Because I have received some notes about your article that they said that the way of the identification was very, very wide, and a researcher should use some sort of search strategy to end up with less number of articles to be able to read the full articles and decide in a better way. What do you think? What is your answer to this?
I think
Wellington, please go ahead and answer.
Okay, I think we found a lot of studies, but I think it's important to get a lot of them. We can increase the sensitivity, but sometimes we can lose some studies that can be important for us. It's for this that we also perform a hand search in the list of references also. But I don't think 1,000, and I don't think there are so many studies that we need to screen it. It was by title and abstract is something that we get faster in performing this process. So I don't think it's too much. Maybe it's better if you don't have to look so many titles and abstract, but in this case,
I agree with you, but because I've received that note to ask you this question, I already asked you, because I'm the moderator, I have to ask. But I definitely agree with you that I don't like actually to make it very sensitive, because we may lose some data and we don't want to lose any data. Yeah. I love the way that you answered this question. Thank you very much. Okay, Zahra, go ahead.
Thank you. And finally, for primary teeth, 40 studies was evaluated calcium hydroxide in primary teeth that were randomized clinical trials, and one was a retrospective studies. And only two studies compare calcium hydroxide to glass ionomer in permanent teeth, and both were RCTs. Please, next, yes, thank you, Dr. Arvin. Yes, and reviewers tabulate all the data, as you can see in table number 2, number 3, and number 4, as you can see at the next slide. Yes, I summarize them in one slide, and the main, would you please, next, yes, thank you. Ultimately, 17 articles were included, but which all were qualitatively analyzed, but 6 were included in quantitative analysis. This is why some studies not included in meta-analysis, short period of follow-up, and the next one is multiple follow-up. Some study has 2 or 3 follow-up, and one of which were included. And the next reason is the final evaluation was not considered clinical success. As you can see, the samples of it comes below. and check laboratory evaluation like micro hardness or something like that, discoloration of dentine. They were not included in the meta-analysis. Next slide, please. Yes. So meta-analyses were performed with 6 randomized clinical trials in primary teeth. Risk difference represent the amount of risk which decrease or increase when there was exposure compared without exposure. And positive risk difference value means increased risk due to exposure. The risk here is clinical success, and exposure is calcium hydroxide liner. As you can see at the next slide, that compare calcium hydroxide to adhesive system. As you can see, 4 studies were included, and despite positive risk difference, there is no difference between groups because it crossed the line, as you can see at the right. Yes. Here I have a question from authors. Foster 2002 and Casagrande 2009 are one study and with same sample. Can we use one study with different follow-up twice in a meta-analysis?
Yeah, please, Wellington, because this is also the question that I have received from others as well. Because sometimes some authors, they publish one article and they just follow their cases for a year or 2 years and then publish another one which they follow same samples for another 5 years. I think I'm not sure is it ethical or not to do such a things, but sometimes they do. And if it happens, can we use that data in meta-analysis and put them together or not?
We usually only include the follow-up, with a long follow-up. The last follow-up is the one that we included. Here we perform it together just because we perform it after a subgroup analysis considering different types of follow-up. But we also analyze in this case data without considering without considering the different follow-up, these types of follow-up. So it's just because of this, but usually we should, if it is just a global analysis that we are performing, we include only the long follow-up, not more than one follow-up in the same analysis.
And what about the duration of this follow-up? Because I've received a question about that from one of the professors, that he asked, is it 3 years is enough? Do we need longer or less? Because in some studies, we find it out they just did the follow-up and monitoring for just 1 or 2 years, and they published it. And there isn't anything more than that. Is it enough or not? And how do you decide what to do with this type of short follow-up or long follow-up, and which one is long, which one is short? What is the criteria, what is the index for that?
Yes, it's very difficult. We are doing a review, so we need to use the data that we have from other studies. And in this case, for permanent teeth, I think we only have follow-up of 3 months, I think, which for pulp, it's a short-term follow-up. Maybe the results will be, maybe the differences will be seen at longer time of follow-up. So I think we need to use the data that we have in the included studies. Sometimes, of course, that is better to include longer follow-ups, but sometimes we don't have yet. And sometimes the differences are seen only at long periods. I think this is a limitation that we pointed out in this study, because maybe longer follow-ups can give a different result. Probably this can happen, but because we don't have we don't have an answer. True.
I mean, it may have some effect on the result.
Yes, probably. especially for permanent teeth and for primary teeth, we have studies with longer follow-up, but for permanent teeth, we didn't have yet. I know that they are performing a study here in Porto Alegre, that is a city near here, that they are doing analysis for a long time in permanent teeth. So maybe results can be different at a long time.
Okay, and there is another question that they said that is the risk difference to be considered for each study?
Yes, we choose this parameter. We also tested the other parameters that we can be used, but we choose this because this was a question about the reviewer of the article. We wanted to use random effect model also, and then they asked us to use fixed because the inconsistency was low. But we believe that the inconsistency was low because was not so much because we have only few studies included, and so we just choose this parameter. It was a question about the reviewer. But considering all the other analyses, the results were the same. Considering random effect model and other odds ratio, the results were the same. So
okay,
this was our choice, just a question about the reviewer.
Okay, so if we go back to the question that Zahra asked from you about the article by Casagrande 2009 and Casagrande 2010, do you think is that okay to have both of them here or not?
It's Foster 2002 and Casagrande 2009.
Oh, yes, 2002 and 2009.
Different name, yes. The other
yes,
different
name but same specimen, same sample.
Yes.
With different follow-up.
Yes.
2002 and 2009. I think we only included the longer follow-up. I think, but
no, I checked it, and they are one study with different follow-up. Foster 2002, yes, Foster 2002 and Casagrande 2009. They have same sample with different follow-up.
Different follow-ups. Yes, we probably choose this because I remember that we always have these questions with a lot of studies, and we usually choose just to use in the meta-analysis the long follow-up. Probably here was because we performed analysis considering different follow-up, just because of that.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not a good idea for us as the authors of this type of article to change just the name of the first author and just publish something with from same data. This is not ethical at all. So, and it is sometimes very difficult even during the meta-analysis to find such a thing. And I think Zahra did a great job by finding such a thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
and they are
carry on, Zahra. Thank you very much. And there is also another things by Viresh that I'm going to ask Viresh to speak about that after you finish the result. Viresh, because your question was very important and your comment was very important. Thanks for that question and for joining us, but I leave it to the discussion part to speak about that again. Zahra, please.
Yes. Dr. Arvin, next slide, please. Could you? Yes. This is Foster, Casagrande, and next slide. This one is meta-analysis for comparing calcium hydroxide to glass ionomer cement. As you can see, two studies were included, and despite of positive risk difference, there was no significant difference between groups. At the next subgroup analysis, 12 months, 12 months of follow-up. As you can see, 4 studies were included, and there was no significant difference. I put them in the table, the comparison group. Next slide, click please, Dr. RB. Yes. As you can see, all of them are comparing to adhesive system, but the last one compared to glass eye number 7, is that okay that we pull the data from different material together?
So Wellington, this question again is from you.
Yes, this was
can you
a
repeat
question.
The question, please? Can you repeat the question?
Yes. I just want to know that it's okay that we pull the data from different material. For example, here additive system and glass ionomer, we combine the data together and analyze it. Is that it has problem or no? It's okay.
The better is to include only materials that are similar, just to perform this analysis. We just choose this one because we wanted to group the 12 months of follow-up and the evidence about using the calcium hydroxide and using in a group without a liner. But we also performed, there is not in the paper, in the figure in the paper, the analysis only with glass ionomer cement and with different types of adhesives. We performed that because it was a question that we also asked if could be a difference considering materials, just because of this. And another problem was because we only have 4 studies, and then we need to group them in a way to evidence something. So this was why we grouped them. But if we have a lot of studies, it's better to not group them, just group studies that are more similar between them.
Thank you. There are 2 questions, one from Farid. Farid, can you turn on your microphone and speak because you raised your hand? And also from Dr. Mariam Raouf. Farid and Mariam, if you want to ask your question, please go ahead. Turn on your microphone and your video as well. Please, Farid.
Hello, Dr. Nakoufa. How are you doing? I'm a prosthodontist, as you know.
Yes, Dr. Farid, hello.
How are you?
Okay,
it's
go
very
ahead.
good to be with you here, but as a foreigner, I just want to ask a question about the clinical application of the study, if it is possible. I wanted to know, do you confirm using this kind of teeth that have deep caries and have been put CH or other kinds of materials at a liner or at the base for crowning? Do you accept it? Do you confirm to use them
okay.
for crowning?
I think Zahra first can answer this question, and then we ask Wellington to complete that. Zahra.
At the end of the presentation, we will answer this question that it's not necessary to use calcium hydroxide. It's the result of this review.
So we can just wait. Dr. Farid, thank you very much for question, but because Zahra believes we are going to explain that at the end of the, maybe during the discussion part, so we wait for the answer until that time, if it is okay with you. Mariam, please go ahead. Turn on your microphone and ask your question.
Hi, everybody, and thanks a lot for your great job. I have a question.
Please introduce yourself, because there are a lot of people that may don't know you. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, I am Mariam. I've studied endo in Iran about 15 years ago, and after that, for about 10 years, I was an academic staff in endo department in Kerman University of Medical Sciences. And it's 2 years I have come to Netherlands, and now here I'm doing a PhD, and besides that, I'm doing root canal treatment also.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. I have a question about the figure 2, and also it can be for other figures also. Here, as you see, I2 is more than 50%, yeah? And that's not so low, and that shows that we have a considerable heterogeneity in the different studies that have been included here. But on the other side, in right hand, you see that the lines of the confidence interval of different studies have a very good overlap. Yeah, I cannot digest these 2 different figures just beside each other.
Okay.
I have another question also, but I prefer to get the answer first.
Okay, Wellington, I give it to you. This is the difficult job. What do you think? The question is about the I2 heterogeneity of the articles, and the result is not going to be very bad. How we can understand this difference, how we can describe this difference. Professor Wellington, please.
Dr. Nikova, can I add something here?
Yes, please.
At subgroup analysis 12 months of follow-up, with different comparison group, we have I2 equal to 0. It was interesting for me. It was kind of weird with different comparison group. I2 was 0. You know, in a subgroup analysis 12 months of follow-up.
Okay, let's see. Wellington, please.
I think the inconsistency, when we have less than 10 studies, probably 10 studies, the inconsistency is not a good parameter to analyze, because there is a deviation. I think there is a heterogeneity here, and the 0 does not represent just because we have few studies, just because of that. So it was for this that I think the most appropriate here, it was to use random effect model, but the reviewer really insists to us to use fixed effect model in this case. But usually it is because there are few studies included in the meta-analysis, because if there are a lot, probably the inconsistency will be higher. I don't think it's a good parameter to look the inconsistency here with few studies included.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dr. Murali, H. Murali, please turn on your microphone and go ahead. Mariam, do you want to add anything, or is that enough? The answer is enough for you. Do you want Mariam to add anything? Dr. Raouf?
Yeah, may I have also, please, another question about the bars, the horizontal confidence interval bars. And I want to know, I'm curious, why fixed effect modeling has been used here, and why not random effect modeling?
Okay, Professor Wellington. Why
Yes,
not randomized model?
We wanted to use, actually the paper that was sent to the journal was using random effect model, but the reviewer asked us to use only fixed effect model because the inconsistency was low, and just because of that. But we believe that random effect model is the most appropriate model to be used here. But the results were the same. Using fixed or random effect model, the results were the same, no difference was seen. So.
Okay, next time I think we need to invite the associate editor of International Endodontic Journal, or even Professor Paul Dummer, to answer this type of question, why they push you. So as a member of the editorial board, I will send them this message that we shouldn't push the authors to do such a thing. Please accept our apology. I agree with you. Sometimes we do something wrong. Okay, thank you very much, Mariam, for very special points that you raised. That was great. Thank you. Okay.
Hi.
Yeah, please.
Dr. Murali here.
Dr. Murali, thank you very much. Can you turn on your video and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I've turned on my video already.
Oh, that's great. We can see you now. Dr. Murali, please go ahead, introduce yourself and ask your question.
I've met you in India during so many conferences. I'm a professor in Bangalore. I work in Bangalore, southern part of India. Of course, I joined late because of heavy rains here and I couldn't join early. I just wanted to know whether the form of calcium hydroxide, does it matter? The form of calcium hydroxide in your study.
Okay, Wellington, I think this is a little simpler than the previous questions. So the type of calcium hydroxide, that is the question that I have received from others as well. Thank you very much, Professor Murali. Nice to see you. Okay, Wellington.
The studies included only using the cement. I don't know if this is the term that is used around the world, but in Brazil it's the calcium hydroxide cement. We have the powder also, but the studies included, all studies included using the cement. Maybe.
So you may say
be.
that the fast-setting calcium hydroxide comparing to non-setting calcium hydroxide.
Yeah.
So the one that they use is the fast-setting calcium hydroxide because as a liner, we cannot use the powder, and which is the washable one. So this type of fast-setting calcium hydroxide are the one that they don't wash out easily. They may wash out after a long time, but we don't use them as a liner. I mean the one that they wash out and we use in endodontics. This is different from the one that we use in restorative dentistry. Okay, Dr. Mural?
Yeah. And if it's better, if we use a light curable calcium hydroxide, which is cured by light,
I think this is the type of, we need another study for that to compare the light Q with the fast setting. So it is very important to know that in systematic review and meta-analysis, the question must be very, very narrow so the authors can answer very specific questions. They cannot answer every question that we have about calcium hydroxide. The scientific part of the systematic review and meta-analysis depends on very important things that we have very small question, very specific question, and the study, I mean the meta-analysis by these two very special authors can answer that particular question, not anything else. So I help Wellington for that. Wellington, do you agree with me about this answer?
Yes, I agree with you. I think the main difference, I don't know if it's going to be solved here, it's because there was, their included articles did not perform a complete caries tissue removal. I think this can be a relevant question here, because with complete caries tissue removal, probably you need a liner, probably. All included studies performed a selective or stepwise caries tissue removal here. So this can be an important thing to consider.
Wow, so this is very important. Thank you very much to raise this. Dr. Morelli, thank you very much. Is there anything else? Okay, go ahead quickly, please, because of the time. Okay?
No, thank you. It's done. I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Zahra, go back and carry on.
Yes, thank you. Subgroup analysis for 24. Next slide, yes. Yes, next slide, please, Dr. Arvi. Yes, this is okay. Subgroup analysis for 24 months of follow-up. As you can see, 3 studies were included, and you can see comparison group in the table. There was no significant difference between groups. Next slide. And subgroup analysis for 50 months of follow-up.
Excuse me, may I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Yes, please. Arvi.
Yes, please. Feel free to ask questions.
In the horizontal bar, this risk difference have a bad meaning or good meaning? For example, risk lower than 0 has a good meaning. It means successful, or it means that it has a risk and failure.
Risk here. Can I answer this question?
Yes, Zahra, you go ahead.
Yes. Risk here means clinical success. So if the risk was positive, it means that we have more possibility of clinical success. So risk not always bad things. Here is clinical success. And exposure is calcium hydroxide. So positive means benefit of calcium hydroxide.
Thanks.
Okay,
Am I
so
right,
can you interpret that, Zahra, again? Can you interpret that for our audience again, please? I mean,
risk here means
in simple language, when we say risk and we say exposure, what does it mean here?
Risk here means clinical success, okay? And calcium hydroxide was exposure. So positive risk difference means we have a more outcome of interest in exposure that is calcium hydroxide. Is that clear?
Yep. Wellington, do you agree or do you want to add anything?
It's okay,
Okay.
I agree. It's okay.
Good, Zahra, good, go ahead.
So you can see the table is, next slide, Dr. Arvin, please. I said the subgroup analysis for, yes, 50 months of follow-up. I said that there was no significant difference between groups. And here we have risk of bias. Considering the quality assessment, low risk relative to, please click, Dr. Arvin, yes. There was low risk relative to selection bias and reporting bias, but high risk was observed for performance and detection bias. It means no blinding of patient or operator, as you can see in the chart. And next slide shows the grade and quality of the evidence, graded with grade. As you can see, low grade of evidence was observed, considered for failure in primary teeth, comparing calcium hydroxide to inert material and adhesive system. It was due to, click please, Dr. RV. Yes, again. Thank you. And it was due to no blinding of patient or outcome assessment, a small sample size, heterogeneity. And next slide shows that we have moderate level of evidence for primary primary teeth comparing calcium hydroxide to glass ionomer cement, and it was very low for permanent teeth comparing calcium hydroxide to glass ionomer cement, and it was due to the inclusion of only few available studies. Here was just two studies, and methodological limitation like small sample size and imprecision and inconsistency, short-term evaluation. Yes. In discussion, we have the hypothesis tested was accepted since no included study demonstrate no beneficial effect of use of calcium hydroxide liner, and a good marginal seal is very important to prevent bacterial infiltration into dentine and control caries progression to arresting the cariogenic process. And this high rate of clinical success probably due to the careful diagnostic criteria of pulp condition and marginal seal. In most of the studies, they didn't use, they checked the pulp status before treatment. Acidic conditioner and adhesive system in the absence of pulpal protection may lead to irreversible pulp reaction in the deep cavities. And this estimation is hard in the clinical situation. But in this study, no difference regarding post-operative sensitivity were found among calcium hydroxide, total edge, and self-edge adhesive. Selective removal of caries tissue was performed in a majority of included studies in primary teeth, and for permanent teeth, stepwise was an option that can be considered with high clinical success rate. At the second stage of stepwise, we have increased the risk of pulp exposure and compromised pulpal health, added extra cost and time, discomfort to the patient. And on the other hand, we have no evidence that bacteria under, please click Dr. Arvin, there is no evidence that bacteria remaining under restoration lead to caries lesion progression. So due to limited lifespan of teeth in primary dentition, stepwise removal is not considered necessary. In conclusion, we can say selective removal up to soft dentine is recommended for both primary and permanent teeth. Selective and stepwise removal limited to teeth which have no sign of irreversible pulposis. There was some limitation in this study. One of them was age. This result of this study was limited to age of patient from included studies. So further study with older patient can lead to different results. And the follow-up is very important. Most of the studies in permanent teeth has a short period of follow-up. And some studies on vital pulp therapy showed that main and most failure happen after 2 years or longer. So the follow-up is very important. In general, there seems that to be insufficient clinical evidence to support the recommendation for using calcium hydroxide liner. In conclusion, we have the available literature showed that calcium hydroxide has no beneficial influence on the clinical success of selective or stepwise removal of carious tissue. And further longer and well-designed studies are needed to confirm this success rate will remain over time.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have 15 minutes. Thank you very much, Zara and Arvin.
You're welcome.
We still have 15 minutes. I'm going to ask Dr. Viresh. Viresh, would you please turn on your microphone and tell us your idea about that sponsorship bias?
Yeah,
Viresh,
hi.
thank you very much for joining us. I know you very well. You are one of the stars in endodontics, but would you please introduce yourself for others?
Hi, Dr. Nekofa. Thank you for the invite today. And I am Dr. Viresh, faculty of adult restorative dentistry in Oman Dental College. And I am a student of both Dr. Nekofar and as well as learning from him till date. I'm doing my PhD. I'm a PhD candidate in Queen's Mary University, and especially this article has been really important for me because I am working on systematic reviews right now. So my only question was, I have two parts of this question. The first question was when you were mentioning the different biases, right? One bias was sponsorship bias you had mentioned. One is that how do we come to know from the article itself that it has been sponsored, because some of the authors might not reveal it, and do we approach the authors to ask them whether it was sponsored or not? And second part of the question was when you were mentioning about the results in the discussion part, you had mentioned that so many articles, no bias, this bias was found, no, this bias was found, but no mention of sponsorship bias was there in that discussion part. So how did you rule out the sponsorship, that there was no bias or there was? I mean, did you approach the authors? It will help me to, you know, rule out this thing.
Thank you very much, Viresh. And before we go and ask Wellington to answer this very important question and very important consideration, I want to add something else. Imagine that I am the developer of a material myself, and I published about that material myself. Then you don't know that. As a person that you are going to do meta-analysis, you may not know that I have this conflict of interest, and I deny that conflict of interest, unfortunately, in many times as well. I remember that ages ago with Professor Kayahan, we did some study in Cardiff University, and there was very, very negative answer about one material. And that material came from a country that one of us was related to that. So Barbara, Professor Kayahan called me and say, Mohammed, do you think it's a good idea to just put this data in a bin and don't worry about publication? Because if we publish, we are going to bother some of our friends. So this is the issue, you know. They didn't pay to us, but they are our friends. So if Viresh, for example, develops some material and I'm working on his material, I say, oh God, if the result is not good, I'm not going to publish it. So that is one of the big bias that unfortunately we cannot find it easily. So Wellington, the question is, how do you report such a thing and how do you ignore such a thing? Thank you, Viraj. That is a very important issue.
Thank you.
Okay, Wellington.
I think it depends of the study. In this case, we wanted to see if there is a difference between using a material and not using a material. So I think when we are comparing two materials, and if our results were saying that calcium hydroxide liner is necessary, maybe could be a bias very important here that we need to consider. That it can be a sponsorship bias because we are saying that it's necessary to use a material. But in this is a very good question because in the majority of studies, we are comparing two materials and there are a big issue here with a sponsorship bias. Sometimes we look at the protocol of the study. Now, usually the protocol of the clinical trial should be registered. So we need to look for the protocol and see if there is some sponsorship there. It's a way to look at this because usually the people say in the protocol that there are some funding there. It should be ethical, this question. But sometimes we cannot see this. Sometimes this can happen. The author are not going to say that there is a sponsorship bias, and this is a kind of bias that we don't have a control here. But it's important to consider. It's important to consider in the analysis, especially if you are comparing two materials or something that can have a big influence of the industry or anything like this.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I may result from this discussion is it is very, very difficult to control this type of bias. And we should try, when we publish, we should try to be honest. But I remember that again from Professor Paul Dummer, the chief editor of International Endodontic Journal, in some of our previous journal clubs, that he mentioned that most of the published articles, they are not very good. So even he used some worse word for that I don't want to use that at the moment. But therefore, I think, don't worry about that. 95% of the publication, they have a lot of bias in that. And we need to be very careful about the result. And the good thing about the systematic review and meta-analysis is at the end of that, we just have 3 articles that we can trust to them. And still, we don't have enough evidence. And I think a week before, Wenki gave us a very, very important analysis to find it out, do we have enough evidence to answer all the questions or not? And in most of the time, the answer is we don't have enough evidence to answer the question. And the good thing is for our young fellows is there are still a lot of unsolved problems. So this is your future as future researchers to go ahead and do that. So Viresh, you are the young one, so carry on doing your research, and other young fellows, we are waiting for the result of your studies. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Nekofa, and
yes,
thank you,
please.
Prof. Wellington. Thank you, Prof. Wellington, for your answer.
Okay, thank you very much for the comment. Is there any other questions? If there is any other question, please raise your hand and I can see your hand, or maybe you can turn on your microphone. Professor Kayahan, do you want to add any comment?
I am the youngest. I am the youngest.
You are the youngest. Okay.
My only comment is
big lie. Okay. Is there any others? Professor Hariri, I know you did. Professor Ali Hariri, I know you did a lot of study about this topic. So if you want to add anything or any question, the authors are still here. Wellington still survived after this difficult question. Wellington, thank you very much. You are very brave. I'm not brave enough to answer the question about my publications. You did a great job. Fantastic. You know, Wellington published a lot of meta-analysis, and I'm sure many of you are going to suggest some sort of future collaboration with this guy and with Viresh and others. So one of the reasons that we made this networking is to work with each other and actually make some sort of future work, better work, and to understand each of us better. So now we have a very, very clear publication from this fantastic group in Brazil, and we know Brazil is also somehow is the mother of endodontics or mother of endodontics. So, and also obviously for operative dentistry. So if we put everything all together, Zahra, can you go back to conclusion and give us just one word or simple word as a take-home message? What should we do? Should we put anything as a liner or not?
I think it's, the sealing is very more important than liner material. This is
So
my
we shouldn't be
conclusion.
worried
Sealing
about the
is very,
liner, even if we have a deep caries or something like that?
I think the sealing is more important than liner. Maybe in the deep caries and very small thickness of dentine, we should put the liner. But the sealing is paramount.
Okay, Wellington, do you want to have some last words? We still have 5 minutes.
No, I agree with her. I think the sealing is very important, and the poop condition also very important to evaluate, because mainly the bad prognosis is about the poop condition that it's not good before the treatment. And thank you for the invitation. If you have, if anyone have any further questions, please talk to us, to me, to Adriana. We are here.
Yes. Before we go for the next question, if there is any, I'm going, okay, I think Professor Zargar is going to ask some question. Professor Zargar, do you have any question? Please turn on your microphone and go.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Dr. Nekufar.
Hello, thank you very much. Go ahead, please. Please introduce quickly yourself and then.
I am the head of the specialized section of endodontic department of Shahid Beheshti University. With warmest greetings to everybody. I'm proud of being with you. My question is that, don't you think the outcome of the score of pain after the treatment is an important outcome? The score of treatment or post-operative pain. I think without using liner, according to my experience, the score of pain of patients is higher than that, and then when we can't use or we don't use a liner. What do you think about this outcome?
So Wellington, it seems that the outcome that Nazanin mentioned that is not somehow measured in your study. So just post-operative pains, and you know, if patient, they have some sort of sensitivity to cold stimulation and or pain, they are not very happy about the result of our job. So what's the answer?
I think this is also important to consider in the results. We couldn't analyze this because of the included studies. Many of them did not evaluate this, but I think this is a question that should be considered also. But and I also think that one important question is one important issue about our work is because we only included the studies that performed stepwise or selective caries tissue removal, and not perform the complete caries tissue removal. And when we perform complete caries tissue removal in deep caries lesions, it's tends to increase the post-operative pain. It tends to increase the sensitivity. So this may be a factor that also I think needs to be studied further if this can influence the post-operative.
And how do you biologically describe such a thing? That means that layer of dentin, when it is somehow affected dentin, still can give us some sort of maybe growth factors or some sort of a stimulation to protect the pulp from this thing. Do you think, is that correct?
Yeah,
I mean, biologically, it's very important to describe the result.
Yeah, I think it's like a liner, you know, it's like the Caries tissue, it works like a liner protecting the pulp, maybe like that.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, there's another question comes from Fariba. Fariba, because you raised your hand, please turn on your microphone, your video, and go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Nekoufa, for this webinar that we have. Do you hear me?
Yes, please introduce yourself.
I'm Fariba Mutawassilian from Restorative Department of Dental Faculty of Tehran University. I'm thankful from Wellington for all the explanation he had. But as Zahra explained, as the last word was that the sealing is much more important, that the type of the liner that you use, that it has been shown in different studies. I think in the next systematic review, it would be a good idea that another inclusion criteria would be the type of the restoration that the seal the cavity. Because the sealing provided by the amalgam restoration, it will be totally different, like the sealing of the cavity restore the resin composite, the glass ionomer. So it could be resultant bias in the final result. So if I want to do a systematic review that I cannot do it because I have not information about it, would be the inclusion criteria of the studies in that has similar final restoration for the sealing the cavity, because it definitely has effect on the result. Thank you, Dr. Nekoufa.
Thank you for about that. That's good point. Wellington, do you want to say something?
I think it's great to, when we perform a systematic review, there are so many questions that rise, and we see that there are so many research that needs to be performed comparing different materials, different types of restoration that can be performed that can influence the results, different outcomes like the post-operative pain that can also be different. So we need to consider all of these things, and I think it's a good thing to about systematic reviews, because we view a parameter of the question and we can see the further studies that can be performed.
Yep, that's good, great. Thank you very much from Fariba and Wellington both, because you're right. There is another question from Dr. Farid that you again asked, do you suggest to these teeth to be used as fixed abutment in prosthodontic treatment? When we do such a treatment on them, can we also start making a crown for them if they need a crown in the future, or we need to remove the whole caries? This is very difficult question. Please go ahead, Wellington. And if others is going to add anything and help, please. Wellington, you first.
I think there are also studies regarding this issue. I'm not sure about what's the evidence, if there is some difference regarding them. Here in Brazil, we perform this, we make this, but I don't know if there is some kind of difference. I don't know the evidence if there is some difference between this teeth and other teeth, if there is some some different prognosis between them. I don't know, but here in Brazil we perform this, and I think it has, I don't know, it's a personal opinion, so I prefer, I think I need to see the evidence regarding this.
Yeah, I love this answer, because when we don't have evidence, it's better to say that we don't have evidence. That's it.
Yes,
when we don't have evidence, we don't have evidence. And we cannot answer the question. So opinion and experience is something else. But do we have enough evidence to say that, yes, we are competent enough to do a lot of things, but these are based on the opinion and our expert opinion, our previous professors, and we just also transfer this idea to our young fellows. But the idea now is to be very careful, and the reason that we choose just meta-analysis or network analysis or umbrella reviews or such a things is to make sure that we need to have high-level evidence to trust. Otherwise, be careful, because we want to do something as a patient-centered treatment. If you want to do something for your patient, you need to use evidence, and without evidence, it's better not to do that. Okay, thank you very much. If any of the people here wants to add anything, please turn on your microphone and go ahead. Otherwise, we are going to have the last word from Wellington. Adriana sent me some text and said that because she has another meeting, she has to left earlier, and send her goodbye to all of you. So Wellington is going to have the last word for the for all of us. Is there any other comment from anybody? Barbara, any others?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, Wellington.
Professor, can I add something?
Okay, yes, Talal, please. Yes, please. Okay. Sorry, I think you are not here. Thank you very much. I know you are expert. We need your comments, please.
No, thank you. Just pointing up.
Talal, you are famous enough and everybody knows you, but it's good to introduce yourself. It is our plan to do that.
Thank you very much. I'm a professor at Syrian Private University. I was really interested. Most of the webinar I followed this interesting topic. As far as I'm teaching restorative and endodontics in the university, and I just want to add something just related to the clinician part of it. Wellington, you did and all the research team, you did a wonderful work, and really it was tough answering all the questions. I really appreciate that. But being a restorative, thinking from the restorative point of view, we are always afraid of having bulb exposure. As Wellington think that, okay, it's a kind of liner. But if you think from endodontic point of view, and especially in the presence of the vital bulb therapy and the new updates now of dealing with the colors of the exposed bulb and the shapes, and if we have still any infected dentine around all the exposures, we can understand. Although we have good success rate for partial caries removal, whether it's selective or whether it is stepwise, but also on the other hand, if we follow the new techniques for vital bulb therapy, we have also more than 90% of high success rate if we follow all the procedures. So I think, and regarding to the last question that was asked clinically, do you really can include such things, a treatment planning of fixed prosthesis? I believe when we are in this, we have to think out of the box and not to be afraid of the bulb exposure and go for removing all the caries, even if we have exposure, to evaluate if we have any avascularity or any yellowish of the tissue in order not to threaten the treatment. I just wanted to add this, not to be so much afraid of bulb exposure. On the other hand, we have high success rate for treatment of vital bulb therapy. Thank you. This is what a comment to be added on this very nice discussion.
Hello, fantastic. Thank you very much. I think we always try to make sure that we remove all the etiology of the pulpal infection or pulpal inflammation as endodontists. But in restorative, there is a tendency to not to expose and leave some layer underneath of that. So this is some sort of a spectrum. On one part of the spectrum, we endodontists, because we do resectional treatment, although, as you mentioned, we do vital pulp treatment at the same time, thanks to biomaterial that we may use to do that. But I do agree with you that in our point of view is different from the restorative issue. However, still, I think we as endodontists these days also respect saving the pulp tissue rather than removal of pulp tissue. Do you agree about that, Talal? So in that situation, thinking conservatively is a good idea. Therefore, you can see that this article by Wellington and his colleagues is published in international endodontic journal rather than a restorative journals. This is amazing. It shows that now we are going to be friends with prosthodontists and restorative guys as endodontists, because usually we thought that, okay, they can create a lot of patients for us by leaving the caries underneath of their filling. But now they said that, no, don't worry, because that one can remineralize. This is the idea. I'm not saying something that I do agree with that. I don't agree, but I think this is the idea that Wellington and his colleagues try to convince us that we don't need to remove the pulp tissue quickly. Wellington, am I right? This is the discussion between me and Talal, just to raise another consideration. Talal, thank you very much. Very nice as usual.
Professor Nakofat.
Yeah, Barbara, please.
Yeah. Maybe we have to change the materials. If we expose the pulp, if we widen the exposure, then we have to change the material. We have to use calcium silicates. And the wideness and the thickness of the material is an issue at that time.
Yep, Talal, you please add something to what Professor Kayahan said, because this is the idea. If the cavity is very deep or we have exposure, we may use biosilicates rather than calcium hydroxide. What do you think, Talal?
Of course.
And the thickness of the calcium silicates.
Go ahead. Thickness of calcium silicate. Talal?
Okay, of course, now we are dealing with the exposed pulp tissue, so we have to apply calcium silicate, more bioactive materials in order to help in forming the barrier. And this is, I totally agree, and with different viscosity of the material. Of course, I believe something very important. And even though I can mention something very interesting, when it comes to us as a dentist, when you have a deep caries, I think you will, the first thing that you will think of for yourself, you prefer not to have a bulb exposure. We are raised to think like this. When it comes to my teeth, 10 years before, when my wife was treating my teeth, I asked her please do not do exposure. Until now, it is surfing, even though I knew at that time that I have infected them. But what I was mentioning, it will be the treatment protocol or the outcome that we have to think of not exposing the bulb at the first stage, unless this teeth will be included in other treatment modality or another fixed prosthesis or something. So we don't want to make any. We don't want to bunch the bridge. We don't want to make any to threaten the treatment modality. Both of them, they have high success rate.
Sorry to stop you, because there was a question by Dr. Farid that she asked that if we want to make a crown on it, do you think it's better to do root canal treatment? So you are going to answer that question somehow as well.
If we go for the literature, we can see that as far as I understand, as far as I understood, that we have to make a root canal for each prosthesis. If we are going to make a full crown, do we have to make a endodontic treatment? Actually, it is a long debate and a long story. A lot of influencing factors will be on the road. But if we go for literature, we can see that almost about up to 20% of teeth will have necrosis. So cost and benefits, do you think of the 80% or will you think of the 20%? But you can anticipate. For example, one of the interesting studies mentioned that the higher incidence of bulb deaths after making a full crown will be for abutment tooth in the anterior area for younger patients. So you can anticipate whether you have this circumstances and you go and all stressed bulb. You can go for root canal treatment at the beginning, but if we have to think 80% more than 20%, and to be more conservative and to preserve more than thinking of doing pulpectomy for teeth that had to be covered. But thinking conservatively from this point of view of preserving or having caries dentine, I would prefer, because I can find high success rate with preserving dentine, high success rate with vital bulb therapy. But for me, even though the partial caries removal will not give me a complete idea about the real situation of the pulp beneath, but I can go with a high success rate, I will go for it if I don't have any treatment plan regarding the full body. But if I have, so in this case, I will choose to go and do pulpectomy in the beginning.
I think Fariba is going to say something because she is an operative lady and she may concern about some of our opinions. Fariba.
Hi again. I don't want to disturb our colleagues or friends anymore. Just I wrote it that what I knew about our approach in the restorative dentistry department and the head of the postgraduate student, Dr. Kermasho, for many, many years in the dental faculty in the restorative department is to keep to save the pulpal tissue. I do not refer the patient to endodontic treatment as much as possible. Remove the superficial caries, we remove the caries in environmental area in order that
Okay, there was an issue. I think Fariba tries to say that same thing almost, that on the one part of the spectrum, they try to save the teeth from sending to endodontic department. So Wellington try in this article to show that, okay, if you want to keep the vitality of the pulp, it's better not to go deeper. Stepwise technique is better. But I have a question from all of you, Talal, Wellington, Barbara, all of you. Do you think, can we still call this indirect pulp capping, or this is a wrong terminology? I don't like the terminology of indirect pulp capping because it hasn't got any meaning to me. I prefer stepwise myself. What do you think, Wellington?
I think now the most usual terminology is the selective removal of caries tissue. There is a work about terminologies in caries research that it is about this question, and they are not recommending to use indirect pulp capping anymore. But it's just, there are so many terms that are used that we can use a lot of terms, but the most accepted now is the selective removal of caries tissue.
Scientifically, do you think indirect pulp capping is a good word or not?
I think it doesn't say if it is a selective removal or stepwise removal. I think it doesn't say so much to us. So I think it's better to say what it is.
Okay, my friend, I believe it is used as indirect pulp capping whenever we are not exposing the pulp. But if we go deep into this terminology and if we follow the Sturtevant's Art and Science of Operative Dentistry textbook, we can understand that if we go for indirect pulp capping, this remains that we are preserving affected dentine, not infected dentine. But the research was done by Wellington and colleagues. I think they are going with the selective removal because they left or they investigated the articles that they left maybe infected dentine, which I mean caries dentine with bacteria inside. You know, affected dentine, you have to apply a caries indicator, certain caries indicators, and you don't have any dye staining that you know that you have maybe less hardness tissue, but you don't have any bacteria. So it is, you can preserve it. So indirect pulp capping specifically is this, but in the endodontic articles, they don't specify. They use it as a selective and, you know, this is something that's between
that is the problem.
And endodontic.
I think if we go back to what Dr. Morales said about the light cure calcium hydroxide, Talal, I want to have your opinion about that as well. And also, please be ready, because after that, I want to ask this question from you as well. What do you think about the question that Professor Murali mentioned?
Actually, for me, I believe whenever we are using a liner material, that it is, we are approaching the bulb 0.5 millimeter or maybe less, the RDT, the remaining dentin thickness. So we are applying a material that it has biocompatibility, and it influence and it helps the pulp to form a bridge, for example. For me, if we use, even though it is recommended in Student Advanced Art and Science, if we use a liner, calcium hydroxide liner with resin material for light curing, I think it's not good. It's not good. Why? Because we have two issues. Why? We want to polymerize, so we are going to use another source of heat and another potential for irritating the pulp. And the other thing, we have to understand that whenever we are polymerizing anything directly, forgetting the distance between the light curing and the liner material, which could be sometimes 4 millimeters or 5 millimeters, and neglecting that the potential of reducing the intensity of the light curing, and forgetting all this, all of this is a hazard potential. Forget about everything. Assume that we have good polymerization of the liner material. In best case scenario, we have degree of conversion is 60 to 70%. What do I mean by this? Still, we have about 30% of free monomers that will continue to be converted to polymers, but on the same time, not 100%. We will still have some amount. And in the deep part of the dentine, we have wider dentine and tubeless. We have so many numbers comparing with the superficial dentine. So I don't want to put any toxic material near my pulp in terms I'm trying to preserve this.
Well, thank you for that reply. Thank you.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nico, for raising that again. I got it clarified now. As you say, we don't really see the distance between the light curing tip and the material. So definitely it will produce some heat, as Professor said. So it's always better to use a self-curing one, which is less harmful, whatever it is, right? That is right. Very good point.
Okay,
Thank
Fariba,
you.
what do you think? Because I know Fariba has got a lot of experience and did some study about that. Fariba, what do you think?
Thank you, Dr. Nekufar. I'm not good about it, but I did it in several years in the restorative department. We got a good result about the sealing, as I explained to you before. And recently,
you prefer the light cure to self-cure calcium hydroxide? No, the question is about the comparison. Fariba, the question is about the comparison of light cure and self-cure calcium hydroxide.
Definitely, as Dr. Morali explained, and other guys, and also Dr.
Talal, yes.
That I enjoy it. Definitely, yes. The self-cure is much better than the light cure, because anyway, there would be some resin in it. And it would be toxic, it would be a direct effect on the pulp. Another irritant would be the light and the heat that is produced, and another irritant for the pulpal tissue. So we should try to gently treat with the pulpal tissue, very gently, like a child. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Wellington.
Thank you.
Because I know you have all the evidence to answer this question. This is the last question, because we have just 5 minutes to finish the session. Because I want to be punctual. We start very punctually, and we want to finish at the end of these 2 hours. We don't want to keep you longer. Wellington, please close the session by answering and adding any comment to this question about comparison of light cure against self-cure calcium hydroxide. And Talal, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation also. I think I agree with you, because I think the self-cure probably is going to have better results at long term, probably. And because the curable materials usually are not so good to the pulp, they are not so beneficial to the pulp like the ones that don't have monomers and other toxic materials that can affect the pulp tissue. And if you have any further questions about our study or other work, we are available here to answer or to talk with anyone, because we really like to talk about this subject. Thank you for your invitation and for all of
Thanks for accepting the invitation in a very short notice. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you all. Thank you, Talal, Bebra, Fariba, all of you. And I'm not going to mention all 100 names again. And Prashana, thank you, Viresh, Murali, all of you. And hope to see you very soon again in our next sessions. I send invitation to many of you, and we are going to arrange same thing again. And hopefully stay safe. And if you want to go back to the work, use enough and sufficient PPE. And I hope all of you have a good and safe future. Thank you very much. So what am I going to do? I'm going to unmute all the microphones if you want to say good words to Wellington. Thank you very much, Wellington.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Wellington.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Stay safe and goodbye.